My name's Rick. I'm an alcoholic.
Bob, alcoholic.
What I'd like to do before we start is I just want to read a few sentences from the foreword to the first edition. It doesn't matter if you follow it or not. I'm not going to read much of it. It says, "This is the foreword as it appeared in the first printing of the first edition in 1939. So this is what they wanted to tell us. It says, "We of Alcoholics Anonymous are more than 100 men and women who have recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body." We've recovered. We're not recovering. We recovered from, we're no longer seemingly hopeless. Now, here's the point. To show other alcoholics precisely how we have recovered is the main purpose of this book. So that's why they wrote this. They're going to show us precisely how they have recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. Okay, so we're going to go through this line by line and through chapter 5, which will begin on page 58, and we're going to try and see what they wrote. It's not important to find out what Bob or Rick think, okay? What we're going to do is try and get at what they wrote and what they're trying to tell us. Now, none of this is written from theory. This is all written from their collective experiences of what worked, the first 100 people. Okay? They hammered out these ideas over the first probably 3 years of being together. And I just want to say something about the difference between theory and experience, because it's really paramount. I'll give you an example. I was watching a video years ago when I first came into the program of a guy, his name was Arthur Young, and he had invented the helicopter, and he was talking about, they had theories of how the helicopter should fly. He was an inventor, and he was an old man when this was aired. He was probably in his mid-80s or so when this happened, and he was being interviewed, and he said they had theories of how the helicopter should fly, and this was typical when they would have an invention. He said their theories are always based in logic, okay? So then they would take and build a model of the theory and fly it to see if it worked the way they thought it would. He said often the model didn't obey their theories. In other words, it didn't work the way they thought. But they didn't say that the experience was wrong and their theories were right. They adapted their theories to the experience. Now, any reasonable mind would do that, wouldn't they? Not me. You know what I was doing all my life? I was trying to get the world to adapt to my theories, see? And I was pushing and shoving and trying to force solutions and things to problems, and it wasn't working. And that's literally how I ended up in Alcoholics Anonymous in the first place. So what we're going to look at is their experiences, not the theories. Much of what we're going to read may not make sense. But I can guarantee you one thing, if you'll try this, if you haven't done it, if you will take the action as we're going through this process in the next couple days here, tonight and tomorrow, you'll have your own experience. It will induce the experience, and that's what we're trying for here, is trying to have the experience. I've had lots of theories that made sense to me and were very logical, but they didn't work. And when I got sober, I thought, well, I just got to work it harder. Then I poured more energy into working something that wasn't working, and guess what? It got worse. Never did it occur to me to let go. Why? Because it made sense to me, see? And that's the problem that I faced. This logical mind, I couldn't seem to get out of my logical mind. This is the problem I had trying to grasp an idea of God also. It just eluded me. I had to start to let the experience teach me, not my theories. So I think that's a big deal when we read the beginning of that. It illustrates a number of things. So that's what we're looking for. What do you think? You want to start?
Well, I had some pretty good theories about what we're told culturally, that if you have a lot of money and if you have a nice house and you have a Mercedes, and if you have a trophy girlfriend who's a lot younger and really pretty, and you'll have a big screen TV, and you can sit in your house and just be as happy as can be. And you know what? I did that. It was the most miserable time I've ever had in my life. I hated everything. Couldn't stand it. But I'm happy to say that because of this, I have a lot less money. I don't have a Mercedes anymore. I don't have the house anymore, and the girlfriend is happily married to somebody else. And my life is wonderful. My life is wonderful. That stuff just did not work.
See, I like to kid Bob. He got to the top of the ladder and found out it was against the wrong wall.
And it's just the experience that I have had with this material. There's a lot of material in the book, and I strongly urge you to read from the beginning of the book about how we got here and what this seemingly hopeless state of mind and body is all about. But I have found, I went to a couple of workshops. Rick's been doing these longer than I have, and I went to a couple of workshops that he was doing with another gentleman. And I started to get a little bit of an inkling. And how this happened, I don't know, but he asked me if I would do one. This was about 10 years ago. Asked me if I'd sit in because the other guy couldn't make it. And I had an opportunity to sit in and do this stuff. Now, I was thinking about it. I was going to the workshop, and I was thinking about all these great things that we talked about here. And I finally, when I was asked to participate, I thought, well, I haven't really been writing anything down. I've just been sort of thinking about it a lot. And
Theory. Got a theory
about it. And if I'm going to sit up in front and tell people to write, maybe I should write something before I start telling other people to write. So I wrote some inventory, and I got to tell you, wham! I've had that experience ever since. It's just, and it's, we were talking earlier about I'm somewhat of a nicer fellow than I used to be. I don't know if that's true or not, but whatever it is, my life is here. And inventory is so important. It's the reason we're ranting about the fourth step is because inventory is so important.
Yeah, and Bob is kind of a different sort of guy. He was, I'll tell you something that's kind of interesting about him. He came into his first AA meeting. At his first AA meeting, Bob got a medallion for 23 years sober. He was an instant old-timer. First AA meeting. He'd been sober for 23 years. That was the experience he was talking about, how he had achieved all kinds of things and was unhappy.
I was a dry drunk for 23 years. I had an experience that caused me to stop drinking, and the compulsion to drink was removed. And I thought AA was where you guys went because you wanted to learn how to not drink anymore, and I was not drinking anymore, so I didn't bother to come to AA. 23 years later, I followed my son to a meeting. He was getting a medallion. I followed him to a meeting. And I met Lenny, who's been my sponsor for the last 17 years, and he dragged me around to some stuff, and I noticed that as I'm going around trying to be helpful to other people, I'm feeling a little better, and life's getting a little better, and I'm not so concerned about having a lot of money anymore, and one thing led to another, and here we are. But I owe it to this, absolutely owe it to this.
So why don't we, and here I'd like to say that if you have some questions, I would say ask them. Let's get some clarity on what the material is saying, okay? If you're confused or we're going to do this slowly, and we've done this long enough, so we've got some pretty good ideas of where the questions are, and we'll cover it fairly well. But if you've got some questions you want to ask them. What I would like to not do is argue about whether the book is accurate, okay? Because that's really counterproductive. I've been doing this a long time at the Union Gospel Mission in St. Paul, and these guys, the treatment program, and they used to gang up on me 20 years ago. You know,
oh, yeah.
I'm telling you, they'd be arguing about whether the ideas were accurate or not. It's really counterproductive to do that. Let's make an assumption here that these guys who wrote this book knew what they were talking about.
Well, it's a very simple reason why it's accurate, because it's their experience.
Yeah.
They're writing down what happened to them, so there's no conjecture here. I'm just simply saying when they wrote the book, they're telling us what happened to them.
Yeah.
So.
Okay? But I encourage you to ask if you want to get some clarity on something. It's really, I think, extremely important to get clear about what they're talking about here and not so, but we'll cover it pretty well. So, page 58. Does anybody need a book, by the way? I've got a few books up here if you want to. Here.
Yeah, it's very helpful to follow along with the reading.
Okay, let's take a look on page 58. Chapter 5 is titled How It Works, so this is how it works.
Rarely rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path.
You know, Bill was asked by Chuck C. why they wrote rarely instead of never have we seen a person fail. It came out in Chuck's book, A New Pair of Glasses, and or maybe one of his talks. I think maybe both. But Chuck said that he asked him that question, why don't you write never? And Bill told him, there's always some drunk who will prove you wrong. If you say never, I'm going to do everything you did and failed just to prove you wrong. Isn't that insane? I'm going to do everything you AA guys say, because you say never will a guy fail. I'll do it and fail just to prove you wrong. And that was an actual experience, apparently, that he had. So they wrote rarely so we could even bring that lunatic in. No, it's true. Yeah.
We have a guy in our home group who did exactly that, and he talked about it after about 5 years of hanging around and being in AA, and of course it worked. You know, he came in with resentments against his family,
against his mother and his brother,
and he knew he was going to do exactly what AA said to do, and he was going to fail. He knew it wasn't going to work.
He heard us talking about inventory a lot in our group, and he says that ain't going to work for me. So then he decided to try it just to prove that it wouldn't work, because he had this case built and it was airtight, see, against him. And he wrote it, and it actually worked. It worked, and he didn't want it to work. So that's how effective this is if you'll try it.
Those who do not recover are people who cannot or will not completely give themselves to this simple program. Usually men and women who are constitutionally incapable of being honest with themselves.
Okay, this was a point where I made some mistakes. I heard this as those who don't recover are men and women who are constitutionally incapable of being honest with themselves. You know how I heard that? Honest with everybody else. Okay? And then I set out to become rigorously, rigidly honest with everybody else. And I stopped stealing because I'd been a thief. I stopped lying. So what are we talking about? What they're talking about here as you get into this is you'll see it. We're talking about self-deception, how I lie to myself. Now, if you'd have said this to me early on, I'd have said, you're crazy. I don't lie to myself. I knew I was dishonest with others, but I certainly tell myself the truth. See, I believe that with all my being. Self-deception. Now, you might say, well, I don't have self-deception. And I'd say, how do you know? Well, how do you know? Isn't self-deception the guy who's got it doesn't know he's got it? You don't know you got it till you get past it and then look back on it and say, you ever been wrong when you were sure you were right? I'll give you an example. I was drinking with a guy in my living room when I was about 18, 19 years old, just me and him. And we got drunk that night, and I just met him that day, and the next morning, he's gone and my money's gone. Stole my money. So I called up people who I thought knew him, found out he was just an acquaintance. He just kind of blew in and blew out, see, with my money. So I slammed him to everybody that I could find that knew him in any way. A couple of months went by. I found my money. I hid it when I was drunk because I was afraid he'd steal my money, see, because I knew I passed out all the time, see, you know. I'd black out and that sort of thing. So here it is. I'm clearly wrong, and I would have bet anything I was right. Okay? So now, if you ever had an experience like that, then let's think it through a little further. How about this? How many things could I be wrong about right now and I just haven't found out yet? Would you like to think about that? I could be living under the illusion that I'm right about a lot of things, and I just haven't come to the awareness yet that I'm wrong. I could be living under the illusion that people like me, and they don't. I could be living under the illusion that people don't like me, and they do. I had an experience with that when I was about 12 years sober, with a guy that I thought didn't like me, and I found out 10, 12 years later that he did like me. And it shocked me. Every time I'd see him, he'd walk past me. I'd say hello to him, he'd just keep going. Didn't acknowledge me, nothing. That went on for 10 years. And then one day I was asked to speak at a meeting. And I went to the meeting and I did this talk, and I was talking to the guy who invited me after, and I says, well, Todd's here. He says, yeah. I says, he doesn't like me. I don't think he likes me. He says, what are you talking about? I said, and I told him, he walks past me, he doesn't acknowledge me, he doesn't say hello when I say hello to him. You know what he said to me? Michael says to me, Don't you know? I said, what are you talking about? He's got diabetes and some other illness where his eyesight is real bad and he can't hear. I went for 10 years thinking this guy. Then he went even further. He says, Todd's the one who asked me to get you to speak at the meeting tonight. I thought, what a fool I've been, see? Here it was, I was living under the illusion he didn't like me, and he did. Amazing. There can be a lot of this sort of thing inside of us, and we're not aware of it, see? So what I would suggest, we challenge what we believe. And we're going to get into this. They're going to talk about this. But this is the kind of honesty that we're talking about. Anybody can be honest with others. But can I start to spot my self-deceptions? You can if you learn to ask the right questions. And this is what Alcoholics Anonymous will do.
So we're talking about men and women who are constitutionally incapable of being honest with themselves. There are such unfortunates. They are not at fault. They seem to have been born that way. They are naturally incapable of grasping and developing a manner of living which demands rigorous honesty. Their chances are less than average.
It doesn't say you don't have a chance, does it? Even if you're of that variety, they're saying your chances are what? Less than average. What's average? 50-50? What are you, 60-40? 75-25? 85-15? You still got a chance if you're willing to look.
There are those, too, who suffer from grave emotional and mental disorders, but many of them do recover if they have the capacity to be honest.
I used to think that sentence meant guys who weren't staying sober. What I've learned over the years, and you can come to my home group to verify this, everybody in AA has grave emotional and mental disorders in one area or another. Come to my home group, I'll show you a bunch of them, and they're staying sober and they're making it because they have the capacity to be honest.
Our stories disclose in a general way what we used to be like, what happened, and what we are like now. If you have decided you want what we have and are willing to go to any length to get it, then you are ready to take certain steps.
So if you've decided now